Hey everyone, Scott here, and I'm of course wishing you Merry Christmas for this year and wishes for the year coming. But before we do that, let's take a quick little recap of what 2022 was on a personal sense, for everyone in the world, but also in a financial sense and the financial well-being of our family. So basically, most of the world moved on from COVID. There's still a few lingering echoes in some of the rich Western countries, believe it or not. I was lucky enough to actually do a little investing tour across the globe this year. No one else is doing anything with COVID except maybe Australia and China. So Philippines a little bit, a few little island countries that are very isolated, Australia being one of them. The rest of the world's moved on, and so I hope Australia learns to move on as well, because it does create impediments to growth and financial growth, and whenever there's financial growth, in theory there's wage rises. So if we're going to complain about things that wage rises and that, we need to get out and make sure every impediment to productivity is removed. And the COVID policies from the government have been the ridiculous things that have ruined productivity in the last 2 years. So hopefully that we get the memo that it's over and done with as well. The special military operation in Ukraine did probably amplify what was already happening in the world, which was interest rate rises, but it was actually inflation, and being led by and really was created by the policies that the governments took around the world for the COVID stuff. So, the flushing of so much money into the world that found its way to the top of the triangle realistically, and the breaking down on purpose of global supply chains, due to COVID policies as well. So they take ages to fix up. You can ruin something in a year and it takes 10 years to recreate. And then we had the special military operation in Ukraine. There's been a civil war in Ukraine for 8 years, and that is amplified with Russia coming across the border for whatever reason. And then that's actually, exacerbated supply shortages of a lot of things. Actually, you don't realize how much goods and services and minerals and materials and things come out of Russia. I think we're all going to learn the hard way. So if the sanctions that have been brought on by the Western world, that's what's causing a whole lot of inflation and supply chains as well. So inflation that is the problem and has been the problem for 2022. I think that's going to last for the rest of the decade. We need to get used to it. Governments actually like inflation. It inflates away their debt, but they need to be seen to be doing something. Okay, so we need to understand really what's happening there. And the rates will continue to rise probably till the middle of 2023. I think we're probably another % or so out of Australia. Historically, not that high, but there's probably 2 or 3 generations that are not really, 2 generations at least, that haven't seen an upward on the rate rises before. So I can understand why a lot of panic has crept in. That panic has also spilled over to the stock market because there was a lot of companies that were trendy companies, I guess. They all had to be in was a certain couple of sectors like tech or something that was cool, or crypto. They didn't have to make any profit. They never made a profit, and because they were borrowing money at zero and they were borrowing money and doing share buybacks, and their prices would just keep rising. Everyone would get bonuses. It was the next thing, and you get this momentum stock. And we had this momentum trend in the market. Well, as soon as rates started accelerating aggressively, and whether you think that's right or wrong, it's made everyone take stock of what they're actually invested in, and companies then had to roll over debts they couldn't roll over, so they had consolidation, and there's a lot of companies will go bankrupt in the next year or so because they couldn't hold on, and they won't be able to hold on. So one of the benefits of rising interest rates is that it'll flush out all the pretend companies, and the ones that are profitable, that actually produce something, will be there to take the can forward, and they'll still make good money and profits, and they'll be good for your portfolio. So what it did mean though was we had probably between 15% and 25% pullback in most of the stock markets across the world, and that has not recovered. However, the tech sector down probably 60 to 70% in some companies. So that's a good indication of what's happening there. So there'll be a lot of people not recovered in that yet. Look, it's not going to stay like that forever, guys, but you need to make some adjustments of some of those stocks that we're going to hold moving forward. we've spoken about a lot of themes at the start of 2021, and they hold steady again today. And they're to do with inflation, and they're to do with a lot of security. So we've got inflation and an inflationary environment. We've also got deglobalization and potentially currency resets coming up in the next few years. So parallel currency friendly trading. The BRICS nations and maybe the Western world is separating a bit. Western world's only 30% of the world, guys. The other world's 70%. So every time you hear like the whole world's against someone, that ain't true. That means is the big media companies are telling you that 30% of the world is the whole world. Not the case at all. But what it's going to mean for us as investors in 2023, and we're going to have to be really careful. There's a lot of risks out there, and we're going to have to mitigate some of the risks. So yes, we need to make profit, we need to make money every year, but we also need to make sure we're cushioning against events that we can't foresee or we think are quite probable. I would say the war will probably drag on for the military operation. That could go to World War III. If that goes to World War III, the stock markets have generally done poorly for quite a while, and domestic growth, that's pulled back because there's so much fear. If we do go to that, I would expect to see something like gold and silver take a pretty big punt up. That's one of the risks. The other risk is that putting that aside, we have some deglobalization still. That is going to mean inflation is still going to be fairly high, and that means the rates will stay high. So there's going to be a lot of discretionary spending in the current environment for people who have mortgages, where they'll hang on to their house. They just won't spend as much on holidays, or they won't spend as much down at the hairdresser. They'll get the cheaper haircut. All those sort of things that slowly flow through. So so in the economy, there's going to be some discretionary spending that I think is really going to be really hit hard. The areas that we want to look at is companies and sectors that actually produce stuff, that actually have assets, that actually have hard assets. So what am I talking about? And this is both for recessionary environment and inflationary environment. And we're going to have both joined together. It's like a stagflation, I think. So this is why we're looking at these things next year. So the things that would do well in an inflationary environment: hard assets. So land, productive land is better. Housing, infrastructure that actually is necessary for everyday life. Commodities, oil and gas. It's a fallacy that these things won't be needed, for the next 50 years. They just will. The technology's not there. Uranium, precious metals. Okay, there's if I look at a few of those things, right? So land, productive land, because there's food shortages, and the reason is because they told us there was going to be. So rich people have been predicting the future on food shortages. Think of that what you will. Oil and gas. It's very political. Is that the world needs so much oil and gas to be productive and keep everyone's level of poverty, bring people out of poverty in poorer countries. They really need cheap energy, and so oil and gas is still the cheapest energy. However, politically, we don't want to do that. We want to keep most oil and gas in the ground. As rich nations, we just want to keep it for ourselves and keep the price high. And I think that's probably going to be that's the commodity that will still continue to be high. So oil tankers, all exploration, oil production. I have a big feeling that copper, when we start to get into minerals like copper, copper and uranium, and so nuclear energy is now green energy again by the stroke of a pen in Europe. So they just had to capitulate and finally come tell the truth to everyone that it is actually clean and green. So they're hitting their green targets again, I think, because they're going to start doing more nuclear energy, which is great. It's great for the world. It should always be done. Precious metals. There's been so many promises made for electric vehicles and electric everything that there's actually, when I listened to the Minerals Council, big conference they had in Dallas a few months ago, they stood up and said, we do not know where all the copper is going to come from for all the promises the governments have made to all their vocal people by 2030. As in, we haven't discovered that much copper yet. We don't know if it even exists in the world. It probably does, but we haven't been able to find it. And where a lot of the copper is sometimes is under rainforest, or they have water issues. And so in South America, there's a lot of copper. China has some copper. Canada does, but you've got to get it out of the ground. So copper, the amount of copper that's been promised to the green cult doesn't exist, and so therefore the supply and demand says that copper has to be really go up in value. And I think copper miners, so copper and silver are often found together, some lead. Those mining companies should have a really strong pricing and results for the next X amount of years. So when I look at things like that, and I'm like, okay, this is something that I would think is potentially a boom for the next 15, 20 years, realistically. Precious metals, there's been so many promises made about electric and all that sort of stuff. That takes so many precious metals, it's ridiculous. And so does all the new technology in space and war machines. So there's a lot of mining to be done. The world's going to look like one big crater, I think, by the end of what we've promised. War machines. Some of my clients would know that we started investing in war machines 18 months ago. We had a big feeling that China and America was going to go and kick China in the balls and start something, because they have a big war machine factory that needs to be fed. Ended up being Russia took the can forward on that one, so that's where that is. And we think it's the decade of war, to be honest. So that there's some war machine companies that will probably do quite well as well. But I guess if you wanted to remember one theme that will suit inflation and also recession, is that hard assets and also companies that make things or that own stuff, right? So imagine if the world went into a fairly chunky crisis, recession. Some people are saying we're going to have the biggest recession and depression globally that we've had in 100 years. That's possible. It happens every once in a while. Policy mistakes have been made en masse for the last couple of years by governments for whatever reason. And so companies that have stuff and create things, or hard assets, so gold and silver, land, commodities is what we're talking about. Hard assets, they do well in inflationary environments. Companies that create things or do stuff. So when I look around, I don't think Netflix, Facebook, Meta, all those sort of companies that, when you really cut the budget out, they are just discretionary. And so Facebook is really a business tool. So businesses cut out that sort of marketing. Netflix is a home tool. Yeah, believe it or not, people will cut Netflix off because their accounts aren't getting paid. All these sort of things. Whereas the companies that actually own things. So I'm talking about infrastructure again. Companies that own buildings. Companies that own big tracts of residential housing, like in America. Prisons in America, I would think would be overflowing and continue to overflow. They generally make money. They I hate to say it, but that's an investment that I would think would do well in the next few years as well. People that create fertilizer, as long as fertilizer is allowed to be used. Crazy that it may not be. Crazy that we even have that conversation. Companies that could produce things like toothpaste, toilet paper, washing liquid. Those sort of things, again, are companies that it's going to go back to because when you cut out things out of your budget, you can't cut out soap and toothpaste. If you're a farmer, you probably can't cut out fertilizer, but you can cut out all these other things. So companies that actually own assets and produce things and have low debt, or hard assets, that two themes is going to go together for the next few years. So we're going to try really hard and make sure we have discussions with clients about positioning portfolios in that way. I encourage you to have a think about that and talk to us as well. But you know what? We've got time. We've got time to do it. For the next couple of weeks, have a rest, because this has been a big couple of years. It was a big year again, and next year's, I'm sorry to say, it is going to be a big year as well. Don't be surprised if there's a fairly chunky crash that comes through in the middle of the year. Like finally the perfect storm hits where rate rises finally flow through. Consumers have finally used up all their savings, finally used up all their buffer accounts, finally maxed out their credit cards, and they just can't hold on any longer. If you listen to the Fed's key indicator of when have we risen enough is when they see 1.6 million extra people unemployed. America's kind of like 400 million people. So if you relate that back to Australia, think of 200,000 extra people unemployed in Australia. That's when they think they've risen enough. That's a good indicator for them, is what they said at one of their big meetings. So, that should lead back to a heap of pain as well before we start to see any sort of pivoting and drops in maybe 2024, 2025. The US election in 2024 will probably be a catalyst for trying to reboot the economy to keep the current government in. So next, yes, what I'm saying is have a rest. Watch out for some pullbacks. There's going to be some indications and some triggers you'll see. Don't be surprised if we see a big pullback, February, March. Don't be surprised if we see a pretty chunky pullback, August, September, pullback, correction, crash. The indicators are saying that potentially is 30%, 40%, maybe even 50% chance for next year. So position accordingly. What things are going to go do well? We've just said hard assets. If you've got $50,000 in the bank, is cash the best place to have it? Maybe, waiting for the crash. But inflation is going to erode your money as well, which is why some people like having some precious metals in their safe as well, to try and just hold a bit of value, and that has worked over time, and I think that would work again. Anyway, guys, look, that's enough from me. For all of us at Edge, just want to say Merry Christmas, have a great New Year, have some great holidays. The office is shutting, however, I am working all the way through, and the reason is because we have to refinance a lot of people's loans to get their rates down before the next February rate rise. So I'm just going to keep punching through. So if you need me, I'm here. Maybe don't ring the office. Maybe just ring my mobile directly, and I will just try and put you in the big list of things that we're all trying to do. But just want to make sure we've got everyone sorted this year who desperately needs to be sorted. So anyway, guys, thank you. I will talk to you again very soon. Bye.